Roll call, please.
Mayor Crawford,
Here.
Commissioner Blanchard.
Here.
Commissioner Davis.
Here.
Commissioner Hardy.
Here.
Commissioner Ryan.
If you'll all stand, those who can, and we'll say a pledge of allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We have no awards and proclamations. Citizens Forum, this is a chance for anyone who would like to come up and speak on any item that is not on the agenda. Please feel free to do so. Your time is limited to 5 minutes. Just give your name and your address. No takers. Okay. A public hearing on the proposed budget.
Item 5.1, public hearing on the proposed 2017 budget. Item 5.1A, first reading, ordinance number 16-10853, adopting the budget.
Okay. I'm going to open the public hearing on the budget. Michelle, are you giving a report on the budget? Okay.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Today will be the first of 2 public hearings that will be held in accordance with state statute that do require 1 public hearing for the 2017 budget. Today is the first. The next one will be August 15th. The 2017 budget calls for no mill levy increase, keeping services, essential services in place, keeping the mill levy flat at 27.311 mills. There's an increase in street funding in the sales tax fund that we've discussed, but just want to put that on the record for the citizens. And we are also trying to increase the fund balance in the general fund to get back on track from some recession years. The ordinance adopting and appropriating the 2017 annual budget will be first reading today, second reading August 15th after the second public hearing. As published, the 2017 expenditure budget net of transfers is about $89 million. If you include the transfers, it's about $105. That's pretty much on track with the 2016 budget. The increase is due to the additional sales tax fund funding coming in. You have to budget to spend it, even if you won't spend it all. Same thing with the general fund. Because the fund balance is going up, we have to show that we are bringing the budget down to 0 at the end of 2017 in accordance with state statute, even though that's not what we do in operation. There's a $4.1 million fund balance cushion in there as reserves as well. The 2 actions requested for today are to hold the public hearing and then pass first reading of ordinance number 16-10853.
Okay. Any questions of Michelle? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Any public comment on the 2017 budget? Okay, close the public hearing. No comment, and I'll ask for entertain a motion on ordinance number 16-10853.
Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
be my guest.
I move that we approve on first reading ordinance number 16-10853.
Second.
Give me that number again.
16-10853.
Oh, okay, fine, thank you. And there is a second? Okay, have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And then those opposed, same sign. Okay. Motion passes 5-0.
Item 5.2, public hearing on the naming of municipal facilities request for the naming of the dog park in the East Crawford Recreation Area. 5.2A, resolution number 16-7389, naming the dog park in the East Crawford Recreation Area as Barkley Park.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the commission. This is simply step 4 in the process for you to have a public hearing to consider the naming of the dog park. That's all we have for this time. There's no cost associated with this.
Whose idea was Barkley Park? Was it a committee? Or was it you? Great name. I love it. I love it.
Okay. Anybody have any questions on Barkley Park? Okay, let me open the public hearing. I guess I should do that first. Any questions or concerns or comments about the naming of the new dog park in East Crawford Recreation Center as Barkley Park? Okay. Whoops, go ahead, sir. Give your name and your address, please.
Doug Rudick, 808 Rainbow Drive. I'm the chairman of the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, and as you probably already know, but we moved that this would be the name for the park. So hope you consider that.
Sounds like a good one. Okay, anyone else have any concerns? Yes.
Back to us.
Yes.
Just one question. Under the naming, I guess, options or categories, does this come under municipal, philanthropic, honorary, or landmark? Or is it a separate category unto itself?
Probably, excuse me, municipal. I would look at it that. It's just a name that the city would provide for our own purposes versus the other purposes aren't, because the other purposes aren't in place.
Very cleverly landmark as well.
Could be, yeah.
I do have a bet at home on this one. Was this named after the dog and you've got mail? No? Lost. Okay.
Barkley
Is
Park
there
is
a
on
Bark-
Markley. It's on Markley.
So it's Barkley Park.
Barkley.
I still like mine better. Okay.
Well,
This wasn't on
suggested
TV, I could
Kay's
still
dog
win the bet,
park,
but-
I don't
nobody-
think I saw that movie.
You haven't seen You Got Mail. Okay. I'll get it to you.
I don't remember a Barkley.
I'll entertain a motion to pass resolution number 167389.
So
All right.
moved.
Madam Mayor, I move adoption of resolution
Yep.
number 16.
He moved that.
Pardon
We
me?
just need a second.
Oh, was there a motion?
He just,
Dr. Davis
he
did.
made
Oh.
it, he made it quick.
I just
He
took
just
the
said so
shortcut.
moved.
All right. I second that.
There's been a motion and a second to pass resolution 167389, naming the dog park in the East Crawford Recreation Center as Barkley Park. All those in favor say aye,
Aye.
and opposed, same sign.
I'm glad you still voted for it, and even though it wasn't.
Oh, I can't say it without laughing. I mean, or chuckling. I love it. It's something you just
I
can't
agree.
say with a straight face.
We're done with that. Okay. Okay, I'll move to consent agenda.
Item 6.1, approve the minutes of August 1st, 2016.
Is there anything Commissioner would like to have removed or amended from the consent agenda?
Madam Mayor, I move approval of the minutes.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of April 1st, 2016.
August.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Okay. Motion carries. Administration.
Item 7.1, second reading ordinance number 16-10845, unconditionally approving the issuance of general obligation bonds by the Salina Airport Authority for the purpose of financing the cost of certain capital improvements located at Salina Regional Airport and Airport Industrial Center.
Okay. Ordinance number 16-10845 was passed on first reading on August 1st, 2016, and since that time, no comments have been received. Any public comment? Okay. Entertain a motion to pass ordinance number 16-10845.
Madam Mayor, I move adoption of, on second reading of ordinance number 16-10845.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to pass on second reading ordinance number 16-10845. May we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Blanchard.
Aye.
Commissioner Davis.
Aye.
Commissioner Hardy.
Aye.
Commissioner Ryan.
Aye.
Mayor Crawford.
Aye. Okay. Item 7.2, please.
Item 7.2, authorize the use of staff time and resources to conduct fundraising efforts and solicitation of public donations and/or sponsorships for the continued upgrades of the dog park on Markley Road.
Vanessa.
Good afternoon. Vanessa Cowie, Animal Services Manager for the City of Salina. Thanks for approving the name. It was good that Chris said it because I don't know if you've heard my accent say those words, but it's laughable at best. So as you know, we've been funding the dog park with private donations. There was requests from the citizens that it not come out of the general budget, and we've managed to fulfill that request so far. And so with phase 1, we're nearly complete. The grand opening is going to be August the 20th. It's a Saturday at 3 o'clock. We're going to have some prizes and some giveaways and have animal control officers there to explain the rules and kind of encourage people to have fun and use the space safely and enjoy themselves. To continue to not use general funds, we were looking at the idea of maybe being able to solicit for donations to continue upgrading the space. So there's been requests for some additional structures to put in there, some shade structures, potable water for humans, which was not included in phase 1. So maybe pouring some more concrete, agility equipment. There's all kinds of fun stuff we can add. The animal shelter does accept private donations, but we don't specifically request them. So if someone does want to donate, we do take their donation and we apply it to a donation fund. This would just allow us to solicit for donations and then apply it to a fund specifically for upgrading and maintaining that space. So we do right now collect about $80,000 a year in private donations. 50,000 of those are memorial donations. And a lot of people are interested in the idea of maybe having a memorial dedication at the park for a loved one, and we'd like to be able to fulfill that request and even maybe encourage that in the future as a way for someone to remember someone. So I've listed a couple of upgrades that we're looking at adding, as well as the types of fundraising efforts that we would look into utilizing: social media, existing literature, license renewals, newsletters, websites, those kinds of things, as well as through some committee meetings and things that volunteers are members of. So any questions?
Any questions?
A loved one or a loved pet?
Both.
Or both?
Both or either.
We love pets.
I was just curious, you're mentioning this as the specific to the dog park on Markley Road. Could it be extended, or should that be extended to include a future dog park as well?
Yeah, I think the wording that we would use would be to promote dog park or dog-friendly spaces within the city, those kinds of things. We wouldn't want to lock ourselves too much into a box and make it specific to Barkley Park. Oh, there, I said it. Cat's out of the bag on Barkley Park. So, there has been a lot of requests for additional spaces such as this. So I think that the wording would be pretty specific. But right now we're focusing on Markley Road and the improvements we can make there.
Well, I certainly think you're going to need some shady places out there.
Yes.
I don't think there's any trees or anything out there. So you're going to need something there to...
Mm-hmm. As well as maybe some wind barriers as well. We're looking at planting some more trees to protect from the wind. Mm-hmm. It's a good start.
Are you going to have fake fire hydrants out there?
We're unsure if those are cute or tacky. We're somewhere in between.
Okay, I guess if we don't have any questions of Vanessa, thank you.
Thanks.
Any public comment? Okay, I guess we're just being asked for authorizing the use of staff time and resources to raise funds for Barkley Park or for a dog park.
Madam Mayor, I move we authorize the use of staff time and resources to conduct fundraising efforts and solicitation. Excuse me. The rest of that.
I'll second that.
Okay, sound like Barkley Park there.
Wow. Caught me.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to authorize the use of staff time and resources to raise funds and promote the new dog park. Any public comment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, same sign. Okay, passes 5-0. Okay, 8.1.
Item 8.1, second reading ordinance number 16-10835, requesting a comprehensive review and amendment of section 36-74 and 36-74.1 of the Salina subdivision regulations and Planning Commission policies number 88-1 and 04-01 to address frontage requirements, access requirements, improvement standards, and a fair share funding mechanism for perimeter streets abutting new subdivisions.
Okay, Dean Andrew.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. If we go back in time on this issue, the Planning Commission made a recommendation to you at their May 17th meeting, which was turned into an amendment to the subdivision regulations that you approved on first reading on May the 23rd, with second reading scheduled for June 6th. At the June 6th meeting, the staff reported to you that based on additional feedback received from the development community and additional analysis that we performed, that some of those design standards and cost-sharing provisions of that ordinance might not be affordable to the local development community. So on June 6th, we set up a time frame for you that recommended that the moratorium be extended, that the Planning Commission have a public hearing on August 2nd that would look at the revisions to that ordinance, that you would consider their recommendation on the 8th of August, today, and consider second reading on the 15th. Since that time, there have been 3 study sessions held on new residential development and perimeter streets with the City Commission, and based on input received from you and from the development community, staff further refined that ordinance and presented it to the Planning Commission at their August 2nd meeting. At the conclusion of their hearing and review, the Planning Commission voted to postpone consideration of the review of the text amendment to their August 16th meeting to allow members additional time to review the proposed revisions. So at this time, we would recommend that you postpone consideration of second reading to your August 22nd meeting to allow the Planning Commission time to complete its review and to make a formal recommendation to you. We're further recommending that the moratorium, which is scheduled to expire on the 15th, be allowed to expire. We don't see any reason to extend it because the earliest that any plat application be considered by the Planning Commission is September 2nd. The other aspect of that is it is the way that the ordinance is set up. It requires the developers to come to the governing body first if they want to pursue a development agreement option. And we imagine that many developers may choose to pursue that option. And if we know that's being pursued, then we will not schedule a preliminary plat for review until the City Commission has had an opportunity to work out a development agreement with the developers. And that would be the primary change in terms of process, is that under policy 88-1 that the Planning Commission has used, basically they're making the determination on the standard to which the road, whether it's good enough or not good enough. And what this does is it transfers that responsibility to the governing body. So in terms of process, there may be cases where developers will come to the governing body to try to work out a development agreement before the plat goes forward to the Planning Commission. Then they know what the standard will be on the perimeter street before they review the plat. So we don't see any harm resulting from allowing the moratorium to expire, but we do understand why the Planning Commission members wanted some additional time to review and digest the revisions. We still believe we are looking at a second reading of the original ordinance because the core standards have not changed. It's more about the process and procedure and who does what when than the actual core standards. So our recommendation at this time would be to postpone consideration of Ordinance 16-10835 to your August 22nd meeting.
Okay. Any questions?
One question. If the moratorium expires and for whatever reason the proposed ordinance was not approved on second reading, what would then happen to those subdivision
Then
plat
we would be
applications?
back to applying the current policies and things that we have in place, have had in place for a number of years. If the ordinance changes are not adopted, then we would apply the current standards. We think, and I think the Planning Commission agrees, that this proposed ordinance provides much more clarification as to what those are and the respective roles between the governing body and the Planning Commission.
So any development agreement would then have to come back to the city commission after the planning commission action?
Now, what we would anticipate is if the developer is requesting consideration of a development agreement to do something other than a city standard street, that they would do that before the Planning Commission took it up. Okay.
Commissioners, remember when we were in the study session, we talked about a sort of a pre-agreement arrangement, and that's based really on the financing split, because what we looked at is the past practice is that there was a Planning Commission policy that did address one aspect of the financing with consent to specials or paying for a street. But when we really looked at it, we said, is it proper for the regulatory board? And with subdivisions, your Planning Commission is really your biggest regulatory board. They do more, you really, by state law, give them more of that than what you retain yourself. And so does it make sense for them to be dealing with the financial pieces of that? So when you look at this, you're going to find that that's not in here. It's just about the requirement for the perimeter street, the requirement for the connections, starting at the highest level and having opportunity based on an agreement to work to an interim level. And pretty much, I think, in line with what you were asking for. And then what we'll need to do is as we mentioned before, we'll go back and take the feedback that we also received regarding special assessments and financing in general, and then we'll need to create a structure for that. And so odds are, not only will you have at some point a draft special assessment policy to deal with, because that piece will stay with you, but also probably list other potential financing tools. And if we feel like we can comfortably create a framework that works for all the various nuances we see when we see developments come to us, we will try to do that. If not, then it may be that each one is going to be looked at different. But we're still examining whether or not we can create a real consistent framework for the financing approach to that makes sense. But we didn't feel it should stay with the Planning Commission. We felt it should stay with you. So absent the ability of a residential developer to make a significant off-site improvement, they would come to you, and they'll know that ahead of time because they'll have a concept. We'll know based on the policy if a road needs to be improved, if a water main needs to be extended, if a sewer main needs to be extended. We'll know all that stuff. They'll know that. It won't take a plat to get to that. They'll just have to, they'll know what the characteristics around that piece of property are. And so as we talked about before then, there'll be certain, a structured guideline approach that we would put in front of you that says, if you want to enter into an agreement, you'll look at particular things and you'll compare that against information or request of them. We won't deal with zoning or anything like that. That's going to be deferred, and everything that goes on will be contingent upon that later, so we don't somehow integrate those processes because we don't want to. Zoning needs to be independent. And then at that point, they can walk away knowing that, one, what's going to be required under the policy, and the policy does provide the flexibility. And if they have a financial plan with you that you've agreed to based on certain conditions, that if they do their part, when they get to the end of their zoning process, if necessary, if it's needed, in the planning process, they'll know if you should choose to participate at certain level with special assessments, if certain amenities are to be included, if how it affect the financing of the off-street or off-site improvements. They'll know all of that. And so that'll be waiting for them at the end of the process. So that's the structure of what we want to try to create. But like I said, the one piece that we're still having difficulty with is creating a financial framework that says, if this happens, then you'll pay X percent and we'll pay X percent, or they'll pay X percent. That's really hard because there are multiple tools involved that could be applied. You will never have a situation or all situations that would provide that special assessments are the best approach. They might be an approach, but they might not be an approach. And that's where we still need to do some more work, and that's another reason we felt it doesn't need to be in this regulatory piece.
In the real life world, will this approach be likely to exert subliminal pressure influence on zoning and planning decisions, knowing that that's already been agreed to ahead of time?
Yeah, not only will it not, that's something we're exceptionally sensitive to, but when we think about what a kind of a preliminary draft agreement might look at, the one section I can tell you it'll have, no matter what, 100% is the section that says that whatever's in there will be contingent upon the future. It will be separate and contingent upon those the future land use actions being separate and happening later. So that way, there's no crossover at all.
But the persons making those decisions would be aware of the agreement made with the city.
Yeah. What we would likely do is at some point is try to create somewhat of a template agreement, and there could be terms that move a little bit, but generally speaking, I think we can probably create one that has most of the main pieces to it. Certainly would have the piece that addresses that aspect.
Okay, and is there a risk that knowing that information ahead of time, would there be any influence on the decision by the other two bodies, zoning and planning?
No, I don't believe so, because when you think of, when I think of the Planning Commission, I almost think of it like someone wants to go buy a vehicle, so they go into the auto dealership, and so they have to go through the process of, in this case, they're not allowed to. They have a right to buy a vehicle, but the key is do you have the money? Right? In some form, do you have the money? Do you have cash? Do you have a loan? Do you and your friends have cash? What this is all about is really saying, what are the rules out there first that they know that they need to go by? And they'll know that ahead of time. And then and what that means is also, what's the allocation of cost of responsibility, and what are the tools, if there's a split, what are the tools that can and will, or should, really should's not the right word, but could be applied and will be applied. And it's just dealing with that piece. So if they have that in hand, they walk up to the Planning Commission. All the Planning Commission needs to know is whatever the standard is that's being applied in accordance with these rules, if there's a split, they already have the ability to do it. Because you don't want to say yes to someone if you don't know that they can take on the full responsibility. So they come to you ahead of time. You might say, we'll do apply specials or some other tool for a perimeter road or extension of water or extension of sewer or something like that. The terms are agreeable to both parties. They can walk up, if they know that, they can walk up to the Planning Commission and say, we can get utilities, we can do the off-site stuff on this, and the Planning Commission knows that, and they can focus on the on-site, and they know that the developer has the ability to make good on that. If at some point the developer can't make good on it, they can't develop. It's that simple. So it'll be set up to where they would have to show and demonstrate the ability to make good on their commitments before actually developing the property.
I think if I'm kind of just jumping into this thing, I don't see the pressure so much on the Planning Commission if you're thinking about contract zoning, from a perspective of contract zoning, because this is a situation where they're saying we can't afford to pay, so we want to enter into some agreement as to cost sharing with the city. So it's not like they're coming in saying, boy, we'd like to get this annexed and rezoned, and if you do that, we'll give you all this parkland. Because that would be more contract zoning. They're saying we're going to give you something but we're actually the one giving. So that isn't, but the question does kind of make me think, is there any implied approval from the city commission standpoint saying, because we'd almost have to look at it and say, like, we're willing to fund you at X amount without saying we think it's advisable, we don't think it's advisable. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
There has to be some level of, we've looked at this and we've determined it to be worthy of whatever level of agreement
Yeah.
there is.
The key will be based on your objectivity, because what we would do is we'd put factors in front of you that we'll ask you to use when you compare what the information there'll be a list of information we'll ask them to submit. It will not be information that should lead you to land use. We'll then we'll give you factors that we'll all can agree upon, and you'll say, okay, these are the factors or guidelines that we'll use when we're looking at this. Again, those factors won't include anything that should lead you to land use. So I can't say that an individual commissioner at some point might not decide to go to land use, and as soon as that happens, you're going to see your staff start raising their hand and interrupting in the most polite way possible, and we're going to say, please don't go there. This is a place that you don't want to go. And again, the statement in an agreement will specifically state that everything is contingent upon that, and that's going to be an independent decision. It's not part of this, and you won't see anything in an agreement that deals with that stage of it, that deals with the land use aspects.
Now, if it was totally out of line with our land use plans, I don't know how that would not influence our decision to.
Well, if that's the case, I'll be honest with you, if that's the case and all of you feel that way, then we're back to square one.
I'm just asking.
Because we can create a framework for you, but we can't make sure you stay there. That'll be up to you to decide that. And part of this, as you remember, is so that on the financing piece, that the residential developer, and you could apply it in a commercial context as well, has some idea based on some criteria of what a financing split might be before they spend all their dollars on engineering and all that. So, but if you can't separate it, then we can't go there.
Well, I just think, and I'll just kind of go back to what we talked about in the study session. That is without doing any sort of fiscal impact analysis and without figuring out we do needs-based. You're needs tested if you want to go on food stamps, but if you want to have participation from a government body, there's no needs testing. So without having needs testing or fiscal impact analysis, I don't know how we get to something other than just having a blanket policy that says and I thought that's kind of where we were getting at. We'll participate, but only up to a certain amount, as sort of a generic policy, but then anything beyond that needs to be spelled out in a development agreement.
Yeah, that's correct. And for example, some of the factors would be what is the distance from the water line, and does it carry capacity? What's the distance to the development? Same thing for a sewer line, the perimeter street issue. The main focus is going to be on infrastructure. There could be some other items, but they are not land use items. So if I can never create a system that if you go into an application and you know location-wise where it's at, and you automatically exit out because you don't like the location, even though those aren't factors that we're talking about or considering, I can't protect against that. We just can't. We can create a framework that deals with the other issues. I think we can do that pretty well, and that's what we're talking about doing. But if you truly don't believe you can go in an unbiased way, and you think that land use is going to be in your head and guide your decision, even on the administrative piece, we're better off not to go there. I think Greg would agree with that.
I think it's more of it'd be a matter of what's a bigger headache for staff. I mean, because if and we dealt with it on that moderate income housing grant stuff with the apartment buildings and stuff. We sit up here in a meeting and we try to figure out what we can ask and what we can't ask, and that seemed to me to be a very difficult thing, not just for the commission but for staff. So, do you foresee this being anything similar to that type of? Like when you say timeout, we can't go there.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that could really be a difficult thing, because then you can't you're making a decision that then goes to another body that does it, when it actually does come back to you, you need a supermajority to even overturn that.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I think we can tell from where the conversation's going if the conversation starts to steer the wrong way and say, you know, we're going to advise that you don't go that place. So I think we can do that, and I think we can create that framework. But like I said, what I can't do is, if it affects your decision-making, if you say openly that if the land use piece is going to affect my decision-making on the administrative no matter what, we don't want to go there. The only option at that point in time is we can still create the framework, we can still create the guidelines, we can do all of that, but rather than do it at the pre-stage, it's going to be at the post-stage. That's the only difference. We can still go about it the same way. Part of this was so that someone doesn't have to spend $50,000 to $70,000 on engineering to be told there's no financial participation, and then possibly not be able to afford to do it, and yet have expended all the dollars. That was part of that's why the pre-stage came into play.
Mm-hmm.
But the framework can be similar. It's just pre or post at that point. When I say post land use decisions.
And that, I guess, that specific land use, but just as far as our following our comprehensive plan, or the general overall master planning for growth and development. I mean, if we see something getting geographically beyond the boundary of, you know, what our utilities are currently set to handle.
Yeah, and again, it depends on the factor. If you look at it and say, I don't like that use there, even though it's suburban residential, it's different than if we say, it's in a suburban residential area, but our comp plan's intended really to take us out quite a few years, and it's pretty far out. And the factor we're really addressing is not necessarily how far away it is in pure distance, although leapfrog might be an issue, leapfrog development, but you're going to be pretty far away from your infrastructure. Odds are you're going to be pretty far away from your infrastructure. If not sewer, it'll be water, if not a perimeter street situation. So there's a pretty good chance that the administrative pieces are going to line up, and you're going to say, well, okay, I know I'm not supposed to think about land use, but I know that it's going to cost, because we'll provide estimates, or we'll have them to whatever process we put in place, but it'll cost $600,000 to get the water line here, $800,000 to get the sewer trunk line here, and you've got a $750,000 street improvement, and they can't afford to do all that by themselves, and they're going to ask us to participate, and we're not sure that we want to put forth the funds to do that. So it'll be the framework of addressing it from that perspective.
And I
But
think
it should
it's fine too, because I think that you get through some of those issues, or you don't make the pre-development agreement. So I think a lot of those things would be kind of self-correcting before we even got to that problem. Because I mean, if it was completely inconsistent with a comp plan or anything, we're not even going to enter into the pre-development agreement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you can make all
It's
those
true.
determinations without discussing the use.
Well, I don't
land
even think you get to the point where you discuss it, because I think sometimes there's that whole self-policing going on that I think people will start becoming more aware of. I don't want to waste any money in preparing for even trying to get to a pre-development agreement if it's so far off from what's likely to be agreed to in a pre-development
So it would
agreement.
be the city is saying that the city does not want to spend its money, or with
Pretty much
special
it's like
assessment.
going, we're not willing to participate at all. I mean, kind of maybe like the housing study said, is that certain things say there will be no participation.
And keep in mind, with regards to the action in front of you, that's a different piece we'll come into. And as we start down that track, like I said, addressing guidelines of how we want to look at the financing piece and the tools and all of that, that can occur whether it's a pre-submittal piece or a post-submittal piece. It can occur the same way to help you have the tool to make those decisions. So we can go along, and if at the time we're trying to kind of package that up, we find that we have the same concern. Maybe we'll get to the point we have the same concern, Commissioner, where we think, I just don't know if we can separate it. We'll tell you we're not sure we can separate it at that point in time, and then you just go to a post-review piece versus a pre-application piece.
Right.
But you're still going to be working with the same stuff, so it's not going to harm us to move forward on that piece and try to get you good information.
And how soon before our August 22nd meeting would the proposed ordinance be available for us to review?
This is it, right?
Or you don't anticipate any more?
Isn't there a Tuesday planning commission meeting that?
That's the date I
This implied
was-
there was one more
Yeah.
planning
The
commission
16th.
meeting.
There's always a potential of requested changes at that point in time, but this is the updated draft, it appears. So So you have that to look at, and then they'll have their discussions and so forth. They could have some modified recommendations. We don't know, but that would be the only factor.
Okay.
So it should be ready for your review.
Was the 75-25 part of this, or was it just the pre-development agreement part of this
Yeah,
piece?
with what
This
you're,
piece, was that a
with
different
this piece right here, it's just about the requirement for the perimeter street and basically accessing the perimeter street and internal access. You'll see some references on the internal accesses as well, because part of your comp plan and our past application of our codes have emphasized not isolating subdivisions but creating interconnectivity. So you'll see that in there as well. And that's really what this does. It doesn't get into the financial. What that means is here's the standard, and that's what this is intended to address. Is here's the standard,
Right.
and there's a variable in the standard. But if you want the variable, you're going to have to talk about dollars, and that comes back here to talk about dollars, so that you can go back, with your plan to the Planning Commission, and they know they can approve the standard if you've worked out the dollars deal and the split and all that. If you haven't, and you say, well, it doesn't matter, we haven't worked it out. The city decided they don't have money in the budget to participate, but I feel like I can fund all the perimeter stuff myself. They still have the opportunity to do that. Our approach would be to properly allocate that, but there's nothing here that would be put in place that would obligate you as a governing body or the city to put forth any dollars towards a private development. And that's when what we're talking about, the formula versus sort of looking at each one independently, trying to make sure we have that flexibility, because you can't obligate in that way.
So when the Planning Commission hears this in a week or so from now, is what they're hearing that the procedure would be that they don't make a determine what standard ought to be used, that if there is this pre-development, it automatically comes to us, versus them making a recommendation and then us either sending it back to them or overriding it?
Yeah, at this point, and they had one meeting to first see this and talk about it, but they didn't have a lot of time because we were still working on the draft up to the meeting. So that's, excuse me, that's why they need more time. So this is not brand new to them at this point. They've had a little bit of time on it. But in essence, yeah, it's to separate. It's not to mix the financial piece with the regulatory piece, to realize that the financial piece, excuse me, comes back to you. A planning commission can't obligate a city to a financial piece. So we really felt that for the integrity of the process, that does come back to the city commission. But then they need to know that if you've agreed to a financial piece and the developer can make good with that, then they're in a position to approve the development if the perimeter stuff is taken care of, and of course the on-site the development stuff is taken care of in accordance with the plating requirements. So that's the context today.
Any more questions?
Madam Chairman, I move we accept the staff's recommendation to postpone consideration of ordinance number 1610835 on the second reading to August 22nd meeting, to allow the Saline Planning Commission time to complete its review, and further recommend that, I hope I can put these together, that the extended moratorium adopted by ordinance number 1610837 be allowed to expire.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to postpone consideration of ordinance number 1610835. Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries 5-0. Any other business?
I would like to compliment the Park and Recreation Department for putting out a robust and exciting activities guide for fall and winter. They've done a very good job at it, and I'm going to be signing up for stuff. That's all I know.
I've read mine too, and I kind of thought I might sign up for some things. I don't know. But yeah.
So
I
anyway,
think
they
it's
did a
good.
very good job.
Good
and,
job.
this is a great asset for the city. It really is.
Anything else? Okay, accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.